So hi everyone, I hope you're doing well. So in this video, basically I'm going to explain how to reference a specific class in another class in Python. It means that, for example, you have created a specific class. Let's call, for example, let's take an example and keep it simple. For example, you have a vehicle. Okay, you have this vehicle. For example, it has some instance attributes, like for example the type of the vehicle. Okay, is it, for example, a car, is it a truck, is it a bus, etc., and the model of this specific type. Okay, so for example, and we have here a parking lot. Okay, we have a parking lot. For example, the parking lot has some instance attributes, like for example the place as an str string, the price per hour, and it has a list for of course in the parking lot we have some vehicles, lots of vehicles that are parking in a specific parking lot. So here this parking lot has some vehicles, which is a list of type vehicle. Okay, so it has lots of vehicles parking in it. So it's like we have here we have reference the vehicle here, which is of type vehicle, in this parking. So the parking has lots of vehicles. Other than lots of vehicles, it has, for example, the place where it is situated and the price per hour. So let's try to, for example, create this example. So here I have created a new project, call it test, for example, and let's create, for example, the vehicle first. Let's create a Python file. Let's call it, for example, vehicle. Okay, so in vehicle, let's, for example, create class vehicle, for example, and let's define the constructor. So def init of self, and we have here the type and the model. Okay, self dot type equals or receives type. Okay, and self dot model receives the model. Okay, and let's try, for example, to define, for example, str to display some information about this vehicle. For example, str of self return, it should return a string, of course. So here, for example, the type of the vehicle is, for example, this, and its model is, example, this one. Okay, dot format of what? Self dot type, self dot model. Okay, for example, let's create an object. For example, v equals vehicle of, for example, let's say it's a car, and for example Maserati, if you want. Okay, and let's print v, which will showcase the content of the method str here. Okay, so let's print v, run. So here let's try to use our interpreter. It's Python 3.10, and run. The type of the vehicle is car, its model is Maserati. Well, very well. Let's move on to the other class, which is the parking lot. Let's call it parking. So let's create another file, another separate file. Okay, let's call it, for example, here parking. Okay, let's create our class. So class parking. Okay, the class parking, it has some attributes. Let's see, for example, the place per price per hour and a list of vehicles. So for example, parking, let's define our constructor. Okay, so here it has, for example, the price, the place, and price per hour, for example. And I don't want to add here list of vehicles. Why? Because, for example, let's suppose that we have just opened the parking and there is no vehicle inside of it. Okay, and it is our job to add the vehicles after. So we're going to add vehicle one by one. So first let's do what? Self dot place equals place. Self dot, for example, price per hour. Of course, it's not necessary to have the same name here. Okay, for example, let's say here, let's see, for example, price place, and here price per hour equals price, for example. Okay, and what are we going to do is we're going to, for example, to initialize the list of vehicles. Let's say, for example, self.vehicles equals an empty list. Why? For example, when we're going to create a new parking, we suppose that there is no vehicle inside the parking. So that is why we're going to initialize it with an empty list here. And we're going to create after a method that adds vehicle. For example, when a vehicle enters to the parking lot, we're going to use the method to add it to this specific parking lot. Okay. For example, here we have done this. Now we have created the constructor. Okay, here with two parameters, and the third one, vehicles, is an empty list. But please don't forget to do this. Import from vehicle, import vehicle. So this part here, vehicle, it references the vehicle.py here. This file, it acts here like a model. Okay, and here vehicle is the class. The second vehicle is our class. So inside vehicle here, which is the model, we have the class vehicle. So let's for example here omit this, because we're going to instantiate objects inside the parking here. Okay, so let's define, for example, a specific method which adds, for example, vehicles to the parking lot. For example, when the vehicle enters to the parking lot, it will add it. Okay, for example, define add to parking. Let's say, for example, vehicle enters or enter parking, okay, of self. So here basically what we are going to do is we need to add some vehicles to what? To the list of vehicles here. Okay, so we're going to add what? We're going to add another argument or another parameter which is of type vehicle, because this self.vehicles, we're going to force it to accept only elements of type, because you know the list can have any type of elements. Okay, but you have, for example, to specify or to force it to accept only elements of type vehicle. So for example here we can say vehicle, and how to specify the fact that this vehicle is of type vehicle? It's simply two dots vehicle, like this. Okay, so vehicle of type vehicle. Okay, so simply what we are going to do is to add elements to this list, which is self.vehicle. So simply it's self dot vehicle. How to add an element to a list is using the append method or extend. You can also use extend, but append, it adds one element at a time. Okay, so self dot vehicles dot append of what? Of this specific vehicle. Okay, very good. And for example, it returns what? It returns self dot vehicles simply. Okay, this way, when you, for example, when you print the when you apply this specific method on a specific vehicle and you want to print it, it will give you the list with the elements inside of it. Okay, very well. Now let's try, for example, to add another method. For example, let's count the number of vehicles inside the parking. Are specific. So here, let's, for example, keep it simple. We're going to add some vehicles, and it means at the end of adding these elements, we're going to count how much elements inside of these specific parking lots. Okay, for example, def number of vehicles. Okay, self simply return len of what? Len of self dot vehicles. It means self dot vehicles. For example, at a specific time we have added 4 vehicles. We're going to return the len of self vehicles. Okay, very well. Now, for example, let's try to print some information about the parking. For example, it means that we're going to create an object of type parking. Okay, and we're going to do what? We're going to print some information. So the basic method to do this is to redefine the str method. So the str method, when you print the object parking, it will give you the information that are inside this method. So, for example, the information, for example, let's say this parking is situated or is located in, for example, in a specific place. You should pay, for example, let's say a specific amount of money per hour, let's say with dollars. Okay, this is the first thing. And for example, let's try to for example, let's say we want to print some information about each vehicle inside self dot vehicles. It means inside the parking. Okay, so this parking is located in, you should pay this per hour, for example. Let's keep this like this. Okay, print this dot format of course self dot place and self dot price per hour. Okay, we're going to print this, whereas we're going to print the elements of it means the vehicles inside this parking. It means the model and name of each the type and the model of each element. For example, let's say for vehicle VH in what? So the vehicles inside the parking are stored in which specific instance attribute? They are stored in self.vehicles. So for VH in self.vehicles, okay? So we're going to do what? Print, for example, the let's say, for example, this like this, for example, which means here we're going to print the vehicle, and here it means the type, and here the model of the vehicle. And for example, let's say print the list of vehicles parking now is, and we're going to do this here, print this dot format of what? Format of self I mean VH, it's VH dot what? So it's vehicle inside, so VH dot type, okay, and here VH dot model, okay. So we have added some vehicles inside self vehicles, which is the list, okay, list of vehicles inside the parking, and here we are creating a loop over this self.vehicles. So for the vehicle in self.vehicles, we're going to print what? Print this, and format VH. So here format, we're going to print the VH.type and VH.model. And for example, since the str here, for example, generally should return a string, so here we return, for example, an empty string, let's say, okay. So let's try this code. For example, let's create some vehicles, okay. Let's create V1, V2, and V3, okay. V1 equals what? Equals vehicle of what? Let's give it, for example, a car, and for example, let's say it has, for example, the car is, for example, Ford, okay. Let's create another vehicle. It's, for example, let's say a truck, kind, let's say Volvo, and for example another vehicle, another car, example, another car, for example, say Maserati, as I have mentioned earlier. So Maserati, okay. Now we have created these elements. Let's try, for example, to print one specific element, and let's see if the information is given from this class, okay. So let's do this. Another time, it's select yes and run. So we have the same information. So we have imported the class here, so we can use it as we want. So the type of the vehicle is car, its model is Ford. Very well. You can do this with respect to the other objects if you want. So we have showcased one. Let's try, for example, to use this method. Okay, let's add these vehicles, all these vehicles, to our parking. So let's create a parking. Let's call it P pk, okay, equals parking of what? Parking, it has the place and the price. So the constructor has the place and the price per hour, and it will instantiate or initialize the list of vehicles with an empty list automatically. So here, for example, let's say place, for example, let's say first, for example, university or met. And for example, the other one is price per hour. Let's say $5 per hour. I don't know. So let's say 5. Okay. And let's add all these vehicles that you have created to the parking. So we're going to use the integer parking. So here pk dot integer parking, it has a specific vehicle, so vehicle v1. Let's do with respect to the other ones, v1, v2 and v3. Okay, so we have here added the element. Now let's try to, for example, so it returns self.vehicles. Let's try to print this. Or we can do otherwise. We can print pk dot what? pk dot vehicles. Okay, let's try to do this first. So it gives us a list of vehicles. So we have vehicle object at this address, vehicle object at the, so it's a list of objects, and each object is a vehicle, of course. Okay. Now, if you want, for example, to return the number of vehicles, so we have 3 here. So print pk dot number of vehicles. Comment this, sorry. So let's see. So we have three vehicles inside the parking lot. And finally, for example, let's print some information about the this parking. So let's see. So here, let's, for example, say print parking simply. So first, let's do, for example, print to separate these elements. So for example, 15 multiplied by this, and let's print information about it. So let's make it, for example, 100. Okay, so this parking is located in fast UMF. You should pay $5 per hour. The list of vehicles parking now is, we have first car, Ford, truck, Volvo, and another car which is Maserati. Okay, so this was just a highlighting of the how to reference a specific class in another class by importing it in the class in which we are coding, which means the main code that you are using can use another class like you are doing for the other models. You can, for example, create your own model and import classes inside from this model. For example, this vehicle .py, which is the model that you are using, the module, so it can have lots of classes, not only one. Okay, so here we suppose that we have just one class, but you can have lots of classes, and you can, for example, here do from vehicle import the specific class inside that module, and you can use it, for example, easily here as we have showed here. You can use it easily as a specific instance attributes inside your code. So thank you very much for your attention. If you have any question, don't hesitate. You can ask in the comment section, and see you in another video.